All right, so today we're diving into something kind of interesting.
Okay.
You've given us this list of 13 things a decent man would never do to the woman he loves.
Right.
I know what you might be thinking. Lists like these can sometimes feel a little surface level,
Right.
but I think this one's different.
Okay.
It's like a springboard into a much deeper conversation
Yeah.
about what respect, trust, and genuine care
Yeah.
look like in any close relationship,
It's exactly right.
Not just romantic ones.
And what's fascinating is how these seemingly simple points
Yeah.
actually tap into some fundamental human needs we all have,
Yeah.
whether we're talking about romantic relationships, friendships, or even family dynamics.
Totally. And I have a feeling this is where your insights are going to be super valuable.
Well, hopefully.
So, should we just jump right in?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. The first item on this list is keep secrets from her.
Okay.
At first glance, it seems pretty straightforward.
Right.
But I have a feeling there's more to unpack here. More than meets the eye.
While it seems obvious on the surface, right? Like, okay, well, yeah, don't keep secrets.
Right.
But it speaks to a deeper need for transparency and vulnerability in a relationship.
Yep.
Think about it. When you feel comfortable sharing even the difficult things with your partner,
Yeah,
that's a powerful sign of trust.
it is.
It's not just about keeping secrets, it's about building a space where you can truly be open with each other.
That makes total sense.
Yeah.
And it actually reminds me of a time, this is years ago, I was dating this girl, and she was convinced I was keeping a secret from her.
Oh, really?
And I wasn't. It turned out she was misinterpreting something totally innocent.
Uh-huh.
I think I was just really engrossed in a book, and she thought I was hiding something.
Oh, wow.
But that whole experience made me realize how fragile trust can be.
Right,
And that sometimes it's not even about the secret itself.
right.
It's about the breach of trust it represents. You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally.
Which actually brings us to another point on this list that I think ties in really well. Make fun of her dreams. Like, this one really struck a chord with me
Yeah.
because our dreams, whether big or small, are so personal
They are.
and deeply tied to our sense of self.
Absolutely.
So to have someone mock them can be really hurtful.
When someone mocks our dreams, it can feel like they're mocking a part of our core identity.
Yes,
It erodes that sense of psychological safety
exactly.
that's so crucial for vulnerability and intimacy in a relationship.
Right.
In fact, there's research suggesting that people who feel comfortable sharing their dreams with their partners report higher levels of relationship satisfaction and commitment.
That's so interesting.
Yeah.
It's like when you feel safe enough to be vulnerable and share those deeply personal aspirations with someone,
Right.
it creates a deeper level of connection and trust.
Precisely. And on the flip side, when someone belittles our dreams,
Right.
it can make us question our own judgment and even our sense of worthiness.
It's almost like a slow chipping away at your self-esteem, right?
Yes.
You start to doubt yourself and your abilities. Not a recipe for a healthy dynamic, that's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Which actually leads us to another point on this list
Okay.
that I think a lot of people will relate to. Control her life.
Yeah.
This source specifically calls out things like career aspirations, friendships, even seemingly small choices.
Yeah.
It feels like this one can be a real sticking point in relationships, right?
It absolutely can be. You see, healthy relationships thrive on a balance of individuality and togetherness.
Right.
When one person tries to control the other's life,
Yes.
it disrupts that balance and creates an unhealthy power dynamic.
It's not about one person having the right way of doing things.
Exactly.
It's about respecting each other's autonomy and choices.
Exactly.
So true. It's about recognizing that you're two separate individuals with your own thoughts, feelings, and aspirations
Yes.
coming together to build a life together,
Yes.
not to absorb each other's identities.
Exactly. And that's why open and honest communication is absolutely crucial.
Right.
It's about being able to have those sometimes difficult conversations about boundaries. Yes.
About what each person needs to thrive, both as individuals and as a couple.
It's like that old saying, communication is key.
Right.
But it's not just about talking. It's about really listening
Yeah.
and valuing your partner's perspective, even when you don't necessarily agree.
Absolutely.
Which, if I'm not mistaken, brings us to another point on this list.
Okay.
That's all about valuing your partner's thoughts and feelings. Dismiss her opinion.
That's right. You've hit the nail on the head. Dismissing your partner's opinions can be incredibly invalidating.
Right.
It sends the message that their thoughts and feelings aren't important.
Yeah.
which can erode their sense of self-worth within the relationship.
It's like their voice is being silenced, right?
Exactly.
And that can be so damaging over time.
It is.
It's essential to remember that healthy relationships are built on mutual respect,
Right.
which includes valuing each other's perspectives even when they differ from our own.
Exactly. Disagreements are bound to happen, but it's how we navigate those disagreements that truly matters.
Are we approaching them with curiosity and a willingness to understand? Or are we shutting down the conversation before it even begins?
That's such a great point. It's not about avoiding conflict altogether.
Right.
It's about learning to engage in conflict constructively.
Hey.
Now, speaking of things that can lead to some pretty unproductive conflicts, let's talk about the next item on this list. Compare her to others.
Right.
I can't imagine anything more damaging to a relationship than constantly being compared to someone else.
It's a recipe for insecurity and resentment, that's for sure.
Yeah,
Every relationship is unique, and every individual brings their own strengths and quirks to the table.
of course.
When we start making comparisons, we're essentially saying that our partner isn't good enough as they are.
It's like we're holding them to an impossible standard,
Yes.
one that's always just out of reach.
Exactly.
And that can be incredibly disheartening for the person on the receiving end of those comparisons.
Absolutely. It creates the sense of inadequacy and can lead to a downward spiral of self-doubt.
So how do we break free from that trap of comparison? Especially in a world where we're constantly bombarded with images and narratives of what the ideal relationship should look like.
That's a great question. I think it starts with cultivating a sense of gratitude for our partners exactly as they are.
Okay.
Instead of focusing on what they're not, let's appreciate all the wonderful qualities they do bring to the table.
Yes.
It's about shifting our perspective from one of lack to one of abundance.
That's so important, appreciating what makes your partner unique and celebrating those qualities instead of trying to fit them into some preconceived mold. And that actually reminds me of another point on this list that touches on this idea of appreciating your partner. Take her for granted.
Right.
It's easy to fall into routines and start overlooking all the wonderful things our partners do for us, especially in long-term relationships.
Absolutely. We can become so accustomed to their presence and their contributions that we stop noticing and appreciating them.
Right, like it just becomes the norm.
Yeah. It's like that old saying, familiarity breeds contempt. But it doesn't have to be that way.
So how do we combat that tendency
Yeah.
to take our partners for granted?
Yeah.
What are some practical things we can do to stay present and appreciative in our relationships?
Well, one powerful practice is expressing gratitude regularly.
Huh.
And I'm not just talking about a perfunctory thank you.
Right.
I'm talking about taking the time to truly acknowledge and appreciate our partners,
Yeah.
both for the big things and the small, everyday gestures.
Yeah.
A handwritten note, a heartfelt compliment, a listening ear after a long day. These small acts of appreciation can go a long way in keeping the spark alive.
I love that. It's about making an intentional effort to notice and appreciate our partners, not just assuming they'll always be there.
Mm.
And speaking of effort, there's another point on this list that speaks to the importance of showing up for your partner. Put her last.
Right.
It's easy to get caught up in our own lives, our own to-do lists, our own needs.
Yeah.
But healthy relationships require a balance of give and take.
Exactly. It's about prioritizing your partner's needs and well-being,
Yes,
not just when it's convenient,
right.
but even when it requires us to make sacrifices or go the extra mile.
And it's not about keeping score, right?
Yeah.
It's about recognizing that relationships are a two-way street
Exactly.
and that both partners deserve to feel loved,
Yeah.
valued, and supported.
You're absolutely right. It's not about keeping a tally of who's done what for whom.
Right.
It's about showing up for each other consistently and making sure both partners feel like their needs are being met.
And sometimes that means having those difficult conversations, right?
Yes.
About what we need, what we're feeling, and where we might need more support.
Yep.
Which, come to think of it, ties in perfectly with another point on this list that we haven't discussed yet. Hurt her intentionally. Well, it might seem obvious that intentionally causing harm is a big no-no in any relationship. Sometimes we inflict pain on our partners without even realizing it.
That's so true. We can be careless with our words, dismissive of their feelings.
Right.
Or even engage in subtle forms of manipulation that chip away at their sense of self-worth.
Yes.
These unintentional hurts can be just as damaging as intentional ones, especially over time.
It's like death by 1,000 paper cuts, right?
Exactly.
Those seemingly small hurts can build up and create real damage if we're not careful. It reminds me of something you said earlier about the importance of psychological safety in relationships. When we intentionally or unintentionally hurt our partners, we erode that sense of safety and make it harder for them to be vulnerable with us.
You've hit the nail on the head. Creating a space where both partners feel safe, seen, and respected is essential for building a strong and healthy relationship.
And part of creating that safe space is being mindful of how our words and actions impact our partners.
Yes.
We need to be willing to own our mistakes, apologize sincerely, and most importantly, learn from those experiences so we don't repeat those harmful patterns.
Absolutely. And that brings us to another point on this list that's closely related to intentionally causing hurt. Shame or embarrasser. Even seemingly harmless teasing can be incredibly hurtful, especially if it's done publicly or repeatedly.
It's like that feeling when someone tells an embarrassing story about you in front of a group of people. Even if they didn't mean any harm.
Right.
That feeling of being exposed and ridiculed can really sting.
Yeah.
And it can damage the trust you have in that person.
Precisely. It's about respect.
Yeah.
And a fundamental part of respect is protecting your partner's dignity and being mindful of their feelings, even in seemingly lighthearted situations.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because those little digs, even if they're intended as jokes, can really chip away at someone's self-esteem over time.
Yes.
Especially coming from someone they love and trust.
Exactly.
It's like building a wall, brick by brick, between you and your partner.
That's such a powerful image, and it's so true.
Yeah.
These seemingly small actions can create real distance and disconnect in a relationship.
And that actually makes me think of another item on this list that can create that sense of distance. Break promises. It seems so simple.
Right. Yet breaking promises, even small ones, can be incredibly damaging to a relationship. It really can. Promises are about trust. Yeah. When we make a promise to our partner, we're essentially saying, you can count on me, I'm reliable, I'll be there for you.
Right.
And when we break that promise, we're breaking that trust.
And it's not always about those big life-altering promises, right?
Right.
Sometimes it's the small, everyday promises that can cut the deepest when broken.
Yeah.
Maybe it's forgetting to pick up their dry cleaning or not showing up for a date you agreed to.
Right.
Those little things add up over time.
You're exactly right. Those small breaches of trust can chip away at the foundation of a relationship just as much as the big ones. It erodes that sense of security and makes it harder to feel truly safe and connected.
So if we find ourselves slipping up and breaking those promises, how do we repair that trust?
Right.
Because let's face it, we're all human and we all make mistakes.
That's so important to remember. Nobody's perfect. But I think the key to repairing broken trust lies in acknowledging the hurt we've caused. Taking responsibility for our actions and making a sincere effort to change our behavior moving forward.
It's about showing up consistently and proving that we can be trusted again, one action at a time.
Exactly. And that requires open and honest communication.
Right.
If you know you're not going to be able to follow through on a promise, don't just disappear or make excuses.
Right.
Communicate with your partner, be honest about the situation, and work together to find a solution.
That open communication piece seems to be a recurring theme here.
It is.
And makes me think about the last item on our list. Hold grudges against her. We've talked about the importance of forgiveness.
Yes.
But holding on to anger and resentment, especially over long periods, can create a toxic dynamic in any relationship, right?
It's like carrying around a heavy weight, poisoning the atmosphere every step of the way. That negativity seeps into everything.
Right.
It makes it difficult to move forward constructively.
It's almost like you're holding your partner hostage to their past mistakes.
Yes.
Preventing both of you from experiencing the fullness and joy of the present moment.
You're so right. And often, the person holding on to the grudge is the one who suffers the most.
Yeah.
It eats away at them from the inside out.
So how do we break free from that cycle of resentment? It's easier said than done, right?
It's definitely not easy, but it's possible.
Okay.
I think it starts with acknowledging the hurt and allowing ourselves to feel it fully.
Okay.
From there, we can begin to explore the root of that anger and resentment, what need wasn't being met, what boundary was crossed.
It's about understanding the source of our anger rather than just stewing in it.
Precisely. And then we can start to practice forgiveness.
Yeah.
Not necessarily for our partner's sake, but for our own.
Right.
Forgiveness isn't about condoning their actions.
Yeah.
It's about releasing ourselves from the burden of carrying that anger and resentment.
It's about choosing to move forward with love and compassion, both for ourselves and for our partners.
Exactly. And that's a powerful choice to make.
It really is.
Yeah.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground today, unpacking these 13 things a decent man would never do to the woman he loves.
Yeah,
And while the list itself might be geared toward a specific dynamic,
right.
I think we've uncovered some universal truths about what it takes to build healthy, respectful relationships.
Absolutely.
Regardless of gender or relationship type,
Regardless of any of that.
it all boils down to respect, empathy, open communication,
Yes.
and a willingness to show up for each other, even when it's hard.
Well said.
So well said. It's about recognizing that relationships are a journey, not a destination,
They are.
and that the real magic happens when we commit to learning, growing, and evolving together.
I couldn't agree more.
And on that note, it's time for us to wrap up this deep dive. But before we go, we want to hear from you. What are your non-negotiables for a healthy relationship? What values and principles do you prioritize in your own life and in your relationships with others? Head over to our social media pages and share your thoughts. We'd love to continue this conversation with you. Until next time, happy diving.